In 1981, four young musicians boarded a private jet out of California. The plane vanished somewhere over the Pacific. No debris, no survivors, not even a signal. For nearly 2 decades, the families mourned in silence until the Navy pulled a jet from the ocean floor and what was inside changed everything. But before the crime, there was just a mother, a quiet town, and a phone call she never expected. Before we start, hit subscribe to help uncover stories they tried to bury and make sure no name stays forgotten. My name is Helen Carter. I'm 63 years old and I've lived in Crescent Harbor, California for the past 19 years. It's a small place, tight streets, rocky beaches, the kind of town where you know who bags your groceries and how strong they make the coffee at the diner. I came here after I lost my son Zane. He was 20 years old, a musician, lead vocalist for a rising rock band out of Los Angeles. They called themselves Crimson Fireline, 4 boys with too much ambition and not enough sense. They took off in a private jet in October of '81 and never landed. Over time, people stopped asking questions. The news moved on, but I stayed. I rented this little house just off Maple Drive, grew a vegetable garden, worked part-time at the church library, and somewhere along the way, I learned how to keep myself from breaking apart. Most mornings, I'd read by the front window, same chair, same cup of black coffee. I'd mark the hours by the shadows across the hardwood floor. I didn't need much. Quiet suited me. The past stayed boxed up in drawers and picture frames turned face down in the polite silence people gave me when they remembered who I was. My husband, Malcolm, he didn't take things as quietly. After the crash, something in him just snapped. He was Zane's manager, had been since the early days, and when the investigation stalled, when the authorities told us there was nothing more they could do, he started unraveling. By spring, he'd been admitted to a psychiatric facility upstate. He was released 5 years later, but we never quite patched things up. He lives a few towns over now, alone. We speak maybe twice a year, if that. Anyway, last Tuesday started like most. I was in my armchair, book open, glasses slipping down my nose. The sun was coming through the lace curtains just right. I remember thinking how quiet the house felt, like even the air was holding its breath. And then the phone rang. That sound, sharp and sudden. It jarred me so badly I lost my page. I figured it was a telemarketer, or the pharmacy reminding me about my refill. I answered with my usual hello, but the voice on the other end didn't match the tone I was expecting. "Mrs. Carter," he said, "this is Lieutenant Commander Jackson with the U.S. Navy. I'm calling in coordination with the Crescent Harbor Police Department regarding your son, Zane." I froze, just stopped, my hand on the counter, the linoleum cool beneath my slippers. My heart didn't race. It sank. He said they'd found a plane. Not just any plane. The plane. The one that disappeared with my son on board. They needed me to come to the base at Port Halston. For identification. For answers. I told him I didn't have time for pranks. Slammed the phone down. I stood there in the kitchen, my hand still clenched around the receiver, feeling like I'd been hit. After 19 years, I'd stopped expecting news, stopped hoping. It was safer that way. The phone rang again. I let it go 6-7 rings before I picked up. This time it was a woman. Calm, clear. FBI. She confirmed everything. And just like that, the quiet life I'd built was gone. I said I'd come. I didn't know then what was waiting for me on that base. But I did know this, whatever peace I'd made with the past, it wasn't going to hold. Not anymore. And when I saw the other parents, some I hadn't spoken to in decades, already on their way to Port Halston too, I realized something none of us wanted to say out loud. Whatever they pulled from the ocean was going to change everything. We rode in silence most of the way to Port Halston. I sat in the back of the Maddox's sedan, my hands folded tight in my lap while Patricia stared straight ahead, and Donald kept both hands on the wheel. No one spoke, not really. We just existed in that strange, heavy quiet that comes when hope feels too dangerous to say out loud. Patricia had offered a soft, "Come with us," when she pulled up beside me near the train stop, and I hadn't thought twice. She and Donald had lost their son Trent the same day I lost Zane, 19 years ago, back when the boys in Crimson Fireline thought their band was just starting to take off. We didn't talk much after they vanished. Nobody did. But that silence hadn't erased what we shared. The base was bigger than I remembered. Security was tight, and the parking lot was already filling with agents, uniformed Navy, and forensics teams. Patricia told me the Cleans were coming too, Derek's aunt and uncle. His parents had passed a few years ago. The Marinos, Ricky's cousins, were expected to arrive later. We were the ones who still remained the ones who had carried these boys in our hearts long after their names stopped making headlines. When Agent Dana Truitt met us at the gate, I was surprised by how young she looked, early 30s maybe. Calm, firm handshake. Her badge caught the sunlight, but her eyes didn't miss a thing. She thanked us for coming and walked us across the lot to a cordoned-off field near the hangars. I don't know what I expected. Maybe wreckage, maybe some torn-up metal laid out on tarps. But when I saw the plane intact, corroded but unmistakably whole, I felt my legs weaken. It was the same jet from Malcolm's old photos. He'd taken them just before the boys boarded with one of those little film cameras we used to carry everywhere. He'd called it their shooting star flight, the start of something big. Now it looked like a relic raised from a grave. The fuselage was streaked with rust, and seaweed hung from the wings like limp, rotting streamers. The red racing stripe along the side had faded to the color of dried blood. Dr. Martinez, one of the lead scientists, stepped forward and explained they'd found it by accident. Some kind of deep-sea expedition studying hydrothermal vents, no military connection. Just a sonar ping followed by a camera feed they couldn't believe. It was resting nearly 12,000 feet below the surface, wedged against the slope of a ridge. The Navy used a marine crane to bring it up, and despite the years, the cabin was still sealed. The windows were cracked inward. The door had never been opened. It had stayed down there all this time untouched, preserving what was inside. The bodies had already been removed. We saw them before we saw anything else, lined up on tarps, zipped into black bags, just a few feet from the plane. When the officials asked if we were ready, Patricia stepped forward first. They unzipped the first bag, and her cry broke something inside me. It was Trent. The pants did it, those ridiculous red leopard pants he used to wear on stage, refusing to be taken seriously. She dropped to her knees, sobbing into Donald's arms. The next bag held Derek. His vest, his silver belt buckle, that same thick head of hair. His aunt collapsed against her husband when they saw him like the last thread had been snipped clean. They were gone. Our boys. Except not all of them. The remaining bags didn't match anyone we knew. Men in business suits, though aged and water-worn. One had a gold watch still clinging to his wrist. Agent Truitt said they suspected these were producers, possibly the ones they were meant to meet with the day of the flight. International record reps. No IDs yet. No pilot among them either. But it was the forensics team that shifted the entire mood. One of them, crouched near the tarp, stood up and said something quietly. Truitt asked him to repeat it. Gunshot wounds. All of them. Suddenly, we weren't just standing by a crash site. We were standing at a crime scene. They believed the victims were executed during the flight, one by one, possibly in the front cabin. No signs of struggle, no seatbelt injuries, just bullet entry points, clean and deliberate. The pilot, they think, set the plane on autopilot and parachuted out. No one has seen him since. I remember asking, or maybe whispering, whether Zane's body had been found. Truitt looked at me carefully and said no, nor had Ricky's. That absence, those two names left unspoken in the list of the dead, cracked something open in my chest. Could they be alive? 19 years is a long time to survive in silence. But they weren't down there. That was a fact. And facts matter. The press showed up not long after. Reporters with cameras and microphones' voices pitched too high for the moment. One woman standing just yards from the plane spoke straight into the lens like it was another day at the office. The recovered jet was carrying Crimson Fireline, she said. Zane Carter on lead vocals, Trent Maddox on bass, Derek Clean on rhythm guitar, Ricky Marino on lead. I heard my son's name on national television for the first time in over a decade, and it didn't feel real. They asked to interview us, one by one. When it was my turn, I kept my voice steady. That much I could do. I had lost all hope, I said. But now I just want the truth. If Zane's out there, I want him to know he still has a mother waiting. After the cameras pulled away, I let the police escort me home. I didn't want to be alone, but I didn't want to be with anyone either. It was that kind of quiet, suspended state. Like I was walking through my own house as a guest. The officer walked me to the door, said I could call any time. I nodded and waited until he drove off before stepping inside. And then I broke. 19 years of grief, all of it came rushing in like water through a broken dam. I sank down against the front door, sobbing into the skirt of my dress, my back pressed hard to the wood. I cried until I could barely breathe, until the salt dried on my cheeks and my chest ached from the effort of holding myself together. Eventually I got up, went to the back room, booted up the old computer. It took nearly 10 minutes to load, but once it did, I opened the Usenet board I used to post on support for families of the missing. I hadn't typed there in years, but the login still worked. I sat at the keyboard and wrote, "They found the plane." That was all I needed to say. Responses came quickly, names I hadn't seen in years. Some offered prayers. Some warned me to be careful. Hope could be cruel after so much time. One reply said, "Protect your heart, Helen. Please." By the time I looked at the clock, it was almost 3. My doctor's appointment was in less than an hour, and I still had to catch the bus. I rushed out with my bag barely locking the door behind me. When I reached the bus stop, it was just pulling away. I waved, but the driver didn't see me. That's when I noticed the man. He was standing at the far end of the shelter, middle-aged, worn jacket. Nothing unusual except the way he stared, like he knew me, like he was waiting for something. I offered a polite nice day just to break the tension, but he didn't smile, didn't even nod. "Saw you on the news this morning," he said. "Your son, probably dead, probably at the bottom of some trench." I remember the way his voice hit me flat, emotionless, like he wasn't trying to hurt me, just stating a fact that didn't belong to him. Another bus pulled up, not mine. He climbed aboard without looking back. But as the doors closed, he stared at me through the window. No expression, just a long, hard stare. I didn't realize how fast my heart was beating until the bus disappeared down the road. My palms were slick. My knees felt weak. Something about that man felt wrong. Not just cruel, intentional. As if he hadn't just seen me but sought me out. I told myself it was nothing. Just a stranger with bad manners. But as I walked toward the store to use the payphone and call Malcolm, I couldn't shake the feeling that the past wasn't just returning to the surface. It was circling me, watching, waiting to pull me under. And it wasn't finished. Not yet. I kept walking. 3 blocks to the payphone, I told myself, just keep walking. The sidewalk was cracked in places, lifting up from years of rain and neglect. I passed the bakery with its closed sign, still hanging the shoe repair shop with that same pair of boots in the window. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt right. I could still feel the man's eyes on me, even though he was gone. His voice too flat, casual, like he hadn't said anything cruel at all. I reached the supermarket and made my way to the side entrance where the payphone stood. The metal felt cold in my hand. I pressed the buttons slowly, one at a time, listening for the dial tone. When Malcolm picked up, I heard it right away. He didn't want to talk. I told him what I needed to say anyway. About the Navy, about the plane, about the bodies. He didn't say much at first, just silence broken by his breathing. I told him I was coming after my appointment, that he needed to hear this in person. He didn't agree, but he didn't hang up either. That was enough. I turned around and there he was again. The man from the bus stop, just standing there. Close this time, closer than before. I hadn't heard him approach. I hadn't seen him walk up, but now he was behind me watching like he'd never left. He didn't speak, didn't smile, just stood there as if he were waiting to see what I'd do. I didn't ask questions. I didn't give him a reason to keep me there. I walked quickly back toward the store. The pavement under my shoes felt too loud. Inside, the automatic doors whooshed open and closed behind me. The smell of produce and floor wax hit me at once. I stayed near the registers where the people were the noise of shopping carts and checkout scanners humming like background static. I saw a closer bus stop through the window near the entrance and decided to wait there instead. Safer that way. I thought maybe I could distract myself, so I went upstairs. The second floor had a small electronics section, televisions, radios, some discount DVDs. I took the escalator up, holding the railing tight. When I reached the top, I saw them right away. Dozens of televisions, all playing the same news clip. My face, my voice, that same interview from earlier on repeat. I watched myself look into the camera and ask Zane to come home. For a second, I forgot to breathe. Someone stepped beside me. A woman in a fleece jacket basket hooked over her arm. "That's you," she said softly. "From the news. I'm so sorry about your boy." I nodded, trying to keep my expression calm. More people came over, one older man, then a teenager, then a mother with a baby in the cart. They all recognized me. The questions started to swirl around me. Where did they find the plane? What happens now? Did you know the band? Someone touched my shoulder gently. Another offered a tissue. Their voices overlapped. I couldn't make sense of the noise. I tried to step back, but I couldn't move. Then I heard a new voice. Firmer. Closer. "Give the lady some space." At first I thought maybe it was store security, but it wasn't. He was back. The same man from the bus stop. He pushed through the small crowd and grabbed my wrist before I could pull away. His grip was solid, too tight for someone just being helpful. I told him to let go. He didn't. He led me toward the emergency stairwell, the door hanging slightly ajar. No one followed. Once inside, the lighting changed. Dim, the echo of our footsteps against concrete walls. I tried to jerk my arm away, and he finally stopped, still holding on. "I'm not here to save you," he said. "I'm here to deliver a message." His tone hadn't changed, not angry, not even cold, just flat, like everything he said had been rehearsed. "If you talk," he continued, "to police, FBI, anyone, you'll ruin everything. You'll never see your son again." Then he stepped closer. I felt something hard press into my ribs. I looked down. A gun. I couldn't breathe. "Please," I whispered. "If you know where Zane is, you talk and he dies," he said. I asked how he could possibly know anything about my son. He leaned in and said a line I hadn't heard in 19 years. "The lighthouse keeper's daughter waits by the shore counting stars that fell." It hit me like ice. That was a lyric Zane wrote the summer before he disappeared. Just a melody he'd been working on. Never recorded. Never shared. I only heard it once late at night in our kitchen. Just him and his guitar. Nobody else would have known those words. "We know everything," the man said. "Your appointments, your grocery runs, your husband in Sunset Hills. We've been watching for years." He stepped back. his hand still near the gun. "Your son's alive," he said. "But if you want to stay that way, keep your mouth shut. We'll be in touch." And then he was gone. Down the stairs, out the door. I don't know how long I stood there pressed against the concrete wall trying to breathe. My knees gave out at some point. A young employee found me maybe 16, 17. He asked if I was okay if I needed a medic. I told him no, that I just needed a minute. He recognized me too. "You're the woman from the news," he said. "I'm real sorry." I nodded, brushing past him, heading back to the escalator. I gripped the railing tighter than before, trying not to look shaken, but every step felt heavy, like I was walking through mud. I saw my bus approaching through the glass doors. I waved hard. The driver was older, kind-looking. He opened the doors again for me. I climbed on and thanked him quietly. My hands were still trembling when I scanned my pass. I took the front seat, the one reserved for seniors, and tried to slow my breathing. I didn't look back at the store. I didn't want to know if he was still watching. The ride to the hospital was quiet. I told myself I could still go to the appointment just like I'd planned. I'd sit through it, go through the motions, maybe even tell Malcolm what happened. But when I stepped off the bus and crossed the lot, I saw a black sedan parked near the curb. Engine running, driver's window cracked. Same man, same stare. He tilted his head, gesturing with one hand, telling me to get in. I stood frozen. He pointed again, this time to the back seat. I hesitated. "I don't know you," I said quietly. "I'm not going anywhere with you." "Back seat." "Now," he said. His tone didn't change. It didn't have to. I got in. The locks clicked shut behind me. He pulled into traffic, eyes never leaving the road. "I know where you were going," he said. "To see your husband. Can't let that happen." I wasn't going to say anything, I told him. I just wanted him to know about the plane. He didn't respond, just tossed something over the seat, a pair of metal handcuffs. I stared at them. "No," I said. He didn't ask again. He reached back, grabbed my wrists, and locked the cuffs on. The metal bit into my skin. "Make a sound," he said, "and I'll kill you right here." Then he kept driving, off the main roads, onto a narrow dirt track through the trees. A cabin appeared up ahead, small, dark, isolated. He pulled me from the car and took me inside. And that was when I realized I wasn't going to my husband. I wasn't going to the hospital. I wasn't going anywhere I could be found. Not without help. And not without leaving something behind. He led me into the cabin without a word, hand still gripping my arm. The place smelled of mildew and something burnt long ago, smoke baked into the wood like it had soaked through the walls and never left. Inside there wasn't much. A battered armchair near the fireplace, a table with cigarette burns carved into the surface, a few crates stacked near the window. No lights, no clock. Just the kind of silence that pressed against your skin. He walked me to a wooden chair near the back wall and sat me down. My wrists were still cuffed in front, but now he added rope, winding it around my chest, and the chair back rough fibers biting into my sweater. I didn't speak. I could feel the weight of it, how useless it would be. He stepped out without explanation. I heard the crunch of gravel under his boots, the flick of a lighter. Through the grimy window, I saw him pacing with a phone to his ear, his other hand holding a cigarette. His voice didn't carry, just shapes in the dark and the red tip of ash moving up and down like a metronome. I stared at the knots in the rope, at the dull metal of the handcuffs, at the uneven floorboards beneath my shoes. None of it gave. When he came back in, he didn't speak. He moved to the far wall and pressed on a panel that looked like it might have once been a cabinet door. It clicked open. He reached in and pulled out several small packages, each tightly wrapped in plastic. My stomach turned. I'd seen enough news to know what they were. Heroin, probably. Maybe cocaine. He dropped them on the table with a dull thud. Then, without warning, he reached down and ripped the tape from my mouth. My lips burned where it had clung to my skin. "You're going to carry these," he said. "Swallow them." I told him no, that I had a heart condition, that I was 63 years old and could barely keep down my medication on a good day. He didn't argue. He just stepped closer, pulled out his gun, and pressed the barrel against my temple. It wasn't shaking. Neither was he. 3 seconds, he said. I picked up the first one. It felt heavier than it looked. I swallowed 4, each one forced down with dry lips and clenched muscles. My throat fought me the whole time. When I finished, he handed me a plastic pill bottle. "These'll keep the lining intact," he said. "You don't want any leaks." I took the pills, sat there, my stomach now a tight knot of fear and foreign material. He cuffed my hands again and tied me back in the chair tighter this time. Then he told me someone would come soon, that if I stayed quiet, I might just see my son again. I didn't believe him, but I didn't have a choice. The room began to tilt after a while, not suddenly, but in waves, like motion sickness without the motion. I felt my limbs grow heavy. My vision softened at the edges. I don't know if it was the pills or panic or whatever those packages might have started leaking, but I couldn't keep my eyes open. Time stopped meaning anything. It was just one long stretch of drifting in and out. I think I heard an engine at one point, then voices, Spanish mostly, the scrape of a metal latch. When I finally came to, I was moving. The cabin was gone. I was inside a truck. Not in the back where the cargo goes, but behind another door tucked inside a false wall. The compartment was tight dark and already full. All women. I couldn't see their faces, but I could feel them young, silent, huddled against the sides. No one spoke. No one cried. I was the only one who didn't belong, and I knew it. Not just because I was older, because I hadn't given up yet. The door closed. The engine roared. We were moving again. I don't know how long we traveled. Could have been 6 hours. Could have been 2 days. The world inside that compartment didn't have time. It had only breath and pressure and the ache of your own weight when your legs started to go numb. Every so often, we stopped. I could hear the outer doors open, muffled conversations in Russian or English, and then the bang of the doors again. The inner panel never opened. None of us were checked. We were sealed in like boxes. Eventually, the truck stopped for good. The door opened and light poured in. I squinted and looked away, eyes not ready. A man barked at us to move. We stumbled out into what looked like a warehouse. Concrete floor, exposed beams, harsh fluorescent lighting overhead. The air smelled like oil rubber and something else chemical and sharp. We were herded into a line near a door marked with radiation warnings. One by one, women were taken inside. I watched as they returned, dazed, walking stiffly, holding their stomachs. When it was my turn, a large man with part of his face collapsed in on itself, gestured for me to follow. His skin was tight over bones, one eye pulled downward by old scar tissue. He didn't look at me with curiosity or surprise, just annoyance. Inside there was a metal wall and a tray with paper cups of liquid. "Drink," he said. I hesitated. My hand shook. He grunted and leaned in close. "Old lady?" "No good," he said to the other man in the room. "Only 4 packages. Weak. Too slow. Maybe send her to Bruno." I drank. The liquid was bitter. Not water. Not juice. Something thick that coated the back of my throat. I felt it hit my stomach almost immediately. "Go," he said, pointing to the next door. I followed. Still no one told me what would happen next. The hallway beyond was darker, narrower. The floor sloped downward like we were heading underground. The man with the broken face stayed behind me, one hand gripping my shoulder. We reached a black door at the end of the stairs. He opened it and shoved me through. The room inside was red. Not painted, just stained. The smell hit me first. Blood, sweat, waste, the raw scent of something human and broken. In the center, 3 women were kneeling blindfolded, gagged, their hands tied behind their backs. A man stood behind them with a pistol drawn. His arm didn't tremble. "Where's Bruno?" The man behind me called out. "I got a reject." The man turned. It took me a second. But even after all those years, I knew that face. I knew it. Ricky, Zane's bandmate. The boy who used to eat spaghetti at my kitchen table and rehearse in our garage. His face hadn't aged much. A little older, maybe, but unmistakable. His eyes met mine. Recognition flashed there. Then something colder. "I'll take her," he said quickly. "Bruno's busy. She's not worth his time." The man behind me handed him some gear zip ties, tape cloth. Ricky gagged me, blindfolded me, bound my wrists. His hands moved quickly, but not cruelly. It was rehearsed and careful. "Come on," he said. He led me out, up the stairs, down another hallway. I counted each step in my head. Behind us, 3 shots rang out, tight, precise, one after the other. Ricky didn't flinch. I stumbled once. He caught my elbow but didn't speak. We reached another room, smaller. He knocked on the door in a rhythm, 3, then 2. It opened. Another voice told us to enter. When he removed the blindfold, I blinked into the light. And there he was. Zane, my son. 19 years missing. Alive. But not the same. Not even close. At first I didn't believe it. I thought maybe I was hallucinating, that whatever was in those pills had twisted the edges of my memory. But it was him. Zane. His hair was longer, streaked with gray in places that had no business being there at his age. His skin looked pale, drawn, like it had spent years without proper sun. But it was his face, my son's face. Older, harder, but still his. He knelt in front of me slowly, like he wasn't sure I'd accept the sight of him. I don't remember what I said first. Maybe nothing. My throat was dry, my chest aching from the weight of everything I hadn't dared to feel in nearly 2 decades. Ricky stood off to the side, arms crossed, his eyes locked on the door. He hadn't said much since we got there. Zane broke the silence. Edric kept his promise. He said quiet. I looked from him to Ricky and back again. "You're Ricky, aren't you?" He nodded once. "I was told if I helped Zane said I'd see you again. That's the only reason you're here." I swear. The words should have meant something. They didn't. Not yet. The office was small, dimly lit by a flickering overhead light and a lamp shoved against the corner desk. There were papers everywhere. Ledgers, shipment logs, torn receipts. Things that looked official but were written in code. The desk itself had a brass nameplate that read, "Manager," though I couldn't tell who it referred to. I was still trying to take it all in when shouting erupted from somewhere outside. Russian, Spanish, English, all tangled in a frenzy. Then gunfire, short, sharp bursts. Ricky jumped into motion, bolting the door. Zane didn't flinch. He moved to the filing cabinet and pulled out 2 handguns, checked each one like he'd done it 1,000 times. "There's a phone," I said, pointing to the desk. "We can call the police, we can get out." "No," Zane said. His voice was firm, like it had carried weight for a long time. "This is our life now, Mom. This is how we stay alive." I shook my head. "No, that's not you. You're not a part of this." "I didn't have a choice," he said. "None of us did. You don't understand what they would have done if I refused." Before I could say anything else, there was a knock at the door, heavy and patient. "Zane," a voice shouted. "It's Bruno. We're under attack. Open up." Zane and Ricky exchanged a glance but didn't move. Then came more shouting. Gunfire again. A pause. Another knock. This one was softer, almost casual. "It's me," said a familiar voice. "Edric." Ricky looked to Zane, who nodded. Ricky opened the door just wide enough for Edric to slip in. His shirt was soaked in blood, his eyes wide but focused. "It's done," he said, panting. "Alec's dead. I shot him myself. This place is ours now." He turned to Zane and Ricky. "I kept my end of the deal. Now it's your turn." He wasn't like the man who'd threatened me at the supermarket. This Edric, he was calmer now, settled into power. His eyes moved across the room with a kind of quiet calculation. He walked to the desk, sat down in the chair behind it, and looked at us like we were employees being called in for a shift change. "Alec made you promises," he said. "Fame tours, all that. But he kept you underground. I'm different. I'll put you back out there. A real band. New faces. Clean fronts. All I ask is that you keep laundering for me, no product, just the books. Use the shows, the merch. You know how it works." Zane didn't say anything. He just stood there, jaw tight, gun still in his hand. Ricky finally spoke. "You said you'd bring my parents." Edric's eyes flicked to him, unmoved. "They're dead, years ago. But I brought Helen, didn't I?" He turned toward me. She almost went straight to her husband. "I had to stop that. We couldn't risk Alec getting wind. I had to make sure she didn't talk." "You used her," Zane said. "You drugged her, forced her to carry—" "She's alive, isn't she?" Edric snapped. "You want to keep it that way? Then you work for me. We all get what we want." I stood quietly, trying to stay upright. My legs were trembling. My stomach still ached from the drugs inside me. I didn't know what hurt more, what I'd been forced to do, or what I was watching unfold now. My son, my Zane, was listening to this man, negotiating with him, like it was just business. I looked at him and asked the only question I had left. "Did your father know?" Zane looked down, jaw clenched. "Yes," he said. "He started it. He knew from the beginning. I felt the air go out of the room. He set us up with Alec. He said it was a celebration, a private flight to meet with distributors. But it was a setup. Trent said no. Derek tried to radio for help. They were shot. Right there on the plane. I didn't get a choice." "But you stayed," I said. "You worked for them. All this time. Because they said they'd kill you if I didn't," he said. "They said they'd find you and do worse than what they did to Derek. I stayed because I thought it was the only way." Edric stood up and reached across the desk. "We had a deal," he said. "We still do." Zane hesitated, then shook his hand. That was the moment I stopped seeing the boy I raised. His face hadn't changed, but something else had. I felt the room sway again, like the ground was slipping under me. I stumbled, caught myself against the edge of the desk. No one reached out. The conversation moved on. Logistics orders bodies to hide men to flip. Murder packaged like management. I took a small step back. Saw the phone still sitting on the desk behind me. Agent Dana Truitt's number was burned into my memory. I reached for it slowly, silently. But Edric saw me. He raised his gun. Zane shouted. Ricky moved first. He lunged toward Edric, but not fast enough. The shot rang out. Zane stepped between us and caught it square in the chest. His body spun, blood blooming through his shirt, and he collapsed into my arms. I screamed into the phone, not even sure I'd dialed correctly. But I heard her voice. "Dana's on the other end." "Help us," I cried. "He shot my son, please." Ricky wrestled Edric to the floor. The gun skittered away. Ricky grabbed it, turned, and fired. One shot, then another, then 3 more. It was fast, precise, final. Edric's body slumped, his blood spilling across the floor, already spreading toward the hallway. Ricky grabbed the phone and gave their names. "Zane Carter," he said. "Helen Carter. I'm Ricky Marino. This is Crimson Fireline. We're alive. But he's been shot. We need help. Dana's voice cut through the line. Units are en route. Barricade the door. Stay where you are. Ricky shoved a filing cabinet in front of the door while I knelt beside my son, pressing my hands to his chest. Blood was everywhere. Warm. Sticky. It soaked through my sleeves and into my skin. Stay with me, I whispered. Just stay. His breath came shallow, then slower. But he didn't let go. I held him there, praying aloud, not caring who heard me. Outside, I heard the sirens, first one, then more. The sound of boots. More gunfire. Then quiet. An FBI agent's voice called from the hallway. Tactical team. Building secure. Ricky moved the cabinet. The door opened and agents flooded in. They swept the room, guns lowered. A medic dropped to the floor beside Zane, already calling for a stretcher. Another checked Edric's body. Deceased, he said. Multiple gunshot wounds. Massive loss. An officer approached Ricky. Who fired? I did, Ricky answered. He was going to kill us all. They lifted Zane onto the stretcher. I followed my hands, shaking, blood still dripping from my wrists. I passed the bodies in the hallway. Men covered with tarps, evidence markers flashing under red and blue lights. Outside, more agents waited. Ambulances, FBI vans, the kind of scene you only ever see on TV, until it becomes your life. One of the paramedics reached for my arm. We need to go, right now. Agent Truitt stepped out of a black SUV just as they were closing the doors. I'll meet you there, she said. Stay with him. We'll handle the rest. I climbed into the ambulance and sat beside the stretcher, gripping the metal rail. Zane's face was pale, his breathing ragged. The paramedic adjusted something, checked his vitals. I watched every move, afraid to blink. He was alive, but only barely. And as the siren wailed through the night, I knew we were racing toward more than a hospital. We were racing toward the truth. And it wasn't finished with us yet. At the hospital, everything moved in fast, deliberate waves. Stretchers gliding past fluorescent lights. Voices low but urgent nurses pushing through automatic doors with clipboards and carts. I stayed by Zane's side as long as they allowed, gripping the edge of the gurney while they rushed him through triage. Blood still clung to my hands and sleeves dried, now cracking around my knuckles. I don't remember how long I stood outside the trauma room, only that I didn't sit. I couldn't. A nurse offered me water, a blanket, even a quiet place to rest, but I shook my head. They didn't know what it meant to wait 19 years for someone you'd already buried in your mind. I stood until someone came to lead me down the hall for processing. That's what they called it, processing. They brought me to a small, sterile exam room and had me sit on the edge of a gurney. A nurse with tired eyes explained that they needed to retrieve the drug packages. Her voice was kind but careful, like she didn't want to scare me any more than I already was. I told her I understood. I told her what I swallowed, how many, and what they looked like. She nodded, gloved up, and handed me a shallow bedpan. The pills Edric had given me, whatever they were, had done their job. One by one, the packages passed, 4 in total, all intact. She placed each into a sealed evidence bag. I stared at the ceiling tiles the entire time, not speaking. When it was over, they moved me to a monitoring room and hooked me up to a heart monitor. I could feel it then, the heaviness in my chest, that tight squeeze that started just beneath the ribs and didn't quite let go. It wasn't pain exactly, just pressure. The kind that reminded you you're not as young as you used to be. They kept me overnight for observation. Early-stage congestive heart failure, the doctor said. Nothing new, but the stress had aggravated it. He recommended rest, low sodium, follow-up appointments. I nodded through it all. I don't think I heard a single word after he said Zane was still alive. Sometime after sunrise, Agent Dana Truitt arrived. She stepped into the room without a file in her hand, which told me more than anything she might have carried. Her tone was steady low, like she'd already spoken to a dozen people that morning but hadn't stopped thinking about mine. She sat in the chair beside my bed and let out a breath before she spoke. "Zane made it through surgery," she said. "He flatlined twice, but they brought him back. He's stable now, critical but holding." I closed my eyes and nodded. She didn't fill the silence. After a moment, she said, "Ricky's giving a full statement. He's been cooperative. We're getting pieces we didn't have before. I asked if they knew what happened back then on the plane." Dana nodded once slowly. "Your husband Malcolm orchestrated the trip. He sold it to the boys as a celebration, a private jet to meet a record distributor, but Alex Sokolov was waiting on board. Once they were in the air, the story changed. It was never about a record deal. It was about laundering. They wanted the band to serve as a front merch ticket sales. All of it just a pipeline for cartel money." I didn't speak. She continued. "When Trent resisted, he was shot. Derek tried to reach air traffic control and was killed. Zane, he was spared because Malcolm wouldn't let them touch him. And Ricky, he agreed to cooperate if they left his family alone." Dana explained that the pilot was one of Alex's men. After the killings, he locked the autopilot, removed the beacon, and parachuted out with the rest. The plane went down in a trench too deep for standard recovery back then off the radar, both literally and legally. I asked why none of this came out in the first investigation. She said Malcolm was committed to a mental facility days after the crash, refused to speak, pleaded breakdown. By the time he was released, the trail was cold. Alec had power, protection. No one pushed harder than they were allowed to. I stared at my hands, the thin lines of blood still tucked beneath my fingernails. "My husband did this," I said. Dana didn't respond. She didn't have to. She stood to leave, but I asked about Zane and Ricky, what would happen to them now. Her expression softened just slightly. "It's complicated," she said. "There's evidence of crimes, but there's also evidence of coercion. They were young, isolated, trapped. If Ricky keeps cooperating, and if Zane survives, we'll argue for leniency, maybe even immunity. But it'll take time." I asked if I could see him. She said she'd make sure of it. They wheeled me down an hour later. The ICU was quiet. Machines murmured softly behind closed doors. They brought me to Zane's room and pushed open the door. I saw him before I saw anything else. He was pale beneath the hospital lights, his chest wrapped in thick white gauze wires running from his arms, his ribs, even his neck. A ventilator breathed for him in slow, metered pulses. His face looked younger than I remembered, in some ways softened by sleep, untouched by fear. I reached out and took his hand. It was warm. I sat there just holding it. I didn't talk at first. I don't know how long I was quiet. Maybe 10 minutes, maybe more. The nurse stepped out, left me alone. And when I finally spoke, I kept it simple. I told him I was here. I told him I was sorry for everything I missed, everything I didn't know, and everything that came too late. I didn't ask for forgiveness. I didn't promise anything. I just told the truth as best I could. The sun shifted behind the blinds. The monitors kept their steady rhythm. I stayed there, fingers laced with his, and watched the line of his pulse move across the screen. I knew there was more to come, interviews, court, truth I hadn't heard yet. But for now, I just listened to the quiet. And in that stillness, I waited for the first sign that my son might come back. It was 3 days before Zane opened his eyes. The ventilator had been removed that morning, and though he was still weak, drifting in and out, the doctors said the worst had passed. I was there when it happened, just after sunrise, with the blinds still half drawn and the room quiet, except for the monitor beeping its slow, steady rhythm. His eyelids twitched, then opened, unfocused at first, like he wasn't sure what was real. He turned his head toward me, and I saw the recognition settle in. I didn't say anything, just reached over and took his hand. His grip was barely there, but it was enough. A nurse came in a few minutes later and gave him a sip of water through a straw, then told him to rest. He nodded, slow eyes, heavy. Before they closed again, he whispered something. At first, I didn't catch it. I leaned in closer and he said, "Ask Ricky about the basement." That night, after Zane was asleep again, I found Agent Truitt outside the ICU wing. She was standing by a vending machine, a half-empty coffee in one hand, looking like she hadn't slept in days. I told her what Zane said. She didn't ask me to explain, just pulled out her phone and typed something in. "There's a warehouse in Denton," she said, scrolling. "Property records listed as a shipping hub, but we've had eyes on it before. It was registered under Alec's cousin, but the paper trail stops cold 2 years ago. I'll put in for a warrant. I asked if Ricky could help. She said he already was. He's been talking," she said. "Names, locations, how the laundering worked. But if there's a basement, we need to know what's in it." The raid happened that Friday. I wasn't there, but Dana walked me through it later. She said they went in at dawn, no sirens, no warning. Just agents in tactical gear, silent and precise. The top floor was empty. Just dust crates, a few forgotten monitors flickering with static. But in the back corner beneath a torn sheet of linoleum, they found a hatch, locked from the outside. Dana said the door was thick, reinforced with steel bars. They had to cut through it. When they finally pried it open and climbed down, what they found was worse than anything she'd imagined. It wasn't just a basement. It was a soundproof bunker, concrete walls, no windows, ventilation piped through narrow steel ducts. Inside were 3 locked rooms. One was filled with old equipment, guitars, speakers, posters. Crimson Fireline memorabilia boxed and coated in dust. Another room held surveillance gear monitors wired to old VHS recorders, rows of tapes neatly labeled by date. The third room held beds. 3 of them, all stripped down to the bare mattresses. Chains bolted to the walls. A metal tray pushed under the door from the outside. Dana said it looked like no one had been there in years. But there were fingerprints, dozens, and DNA. Some matched Zane and Ricky. Others didn't. "We think there were more," she told me. "Other boys, other bands maybe. We don't know yet." She didn't need to say it outright, I already knew. The band wasn't just a cover, it was a trap. Something they used to lure in kids with talent and nothing to lose. They took their faces, their names, and turned them into product. And if they disobeyed, they disappeared into that basement. Dana said the tapes showed rehearsals, interviews, recordings that were never released. One clip showed Zane barely 20, his face bruised, singing into a mic with a gun visible off camera. Another showed Ricky cleaning blood off a bass guitar. In all of them, someone stood just out of frame. Always the same shadow. Alec. Watching. Later that week, Dana gave me access to the tapes. Not all of them, just a few. Enough to understand. She let me watch them alone in a dark room inside the federal building. The footage was grainy, black and white, time-stamped in red numbers that flickered every time the camera jolted. In one, Zane was being interviewed. He looked straight into the camera, his voice quiet, his answers rehearsed. But then, at the very end, the camera kept rolling after the session ended. The man behind it said, "You know what happens if you try to leave." Zane didn't move. Just looked down and nodded. It was the kind of footage you never forget, because it strips away whatever lies you told yourself about choice. That night, I sat by Zane's bed and told him what I saw. He didn't look away, just listened. When I finished, he asked, "Do they believe me now?" I told him yes. And I meant it. The next day, Agent Truitt filed charges against a dozen people, Alec's cousin, the pilot, 2 club owners, even an entertainment manager who'd once worked with Crimson Fireline. The tapes were enough to unravel the whole web. But one thing still didn't make sense. Zane had told me Malcolm, my husband, had helped arrange the original deal, but his name never appeared in the records. No wire transfers, no phone logs, nothing. When I brought it up to Dana, she nodded slowly and said, "We think he kept his hands clean on purpose. Let Alec handle the dirty work. That way, if anything fell apart, he could play innocent." I asked if he could still be charged. She didn't answer. 2 days later, a package arrived at the hospital. No return address, just my name on the front. Inside was a small box, and inside that a cassette tape, labeled 1984, personal. There was also a short note. It read, "You always wanted to know. I'm sorry I never told you. I couldn't protect him. I couldn't protect any of them." It was signed Malcolm. My hands shook as I held it. I hadn't seen his handwriting in years. I took the tape to the FBI lab that afternoon. They made a digital copy and played it back in a secure room. It was a recording, a conversation between Malcolm and Alec. The audio was rough but clear enough. You could hear Malcolm's voice say, "She doesn't know. Helen thinks we're going to New York. Let her think that. Let her think." Alec replied, "She's not stupid. If the boys talk, it's over." And then Malcolm softly, almost like regret, "Then make sure they don't talk." That was it. No more doubt, no more gray. My husband hadn't just handed over the band, he'd handed over our son. That night I stood at Zane's bedside again. I didn't tell him about the tape. Not yet. His body was still healing and there would be time for that later. But I held his hand, and I promised him something. I told him we'd finish this. All of it. That no one else would be buried under someone else's silence. And just before the nurses dimmed the lights, he opened his eyes and said, "Then let's start with Dad." We found Malcolm living under a different name in a retirement community, 2 counties South Palm, Crest Gardens, tucked off Highway 17 behind a row of aging palms and half-full parking lots. He'd moved in 8 years ago after the heart episode, after the legal settlement, after everyone stopped asking questions. He was going by Martin Hale then. I don't know why he picked that name. It sounded soft, almost gentle. Nothing like the man who once stood in our kitchen telling our son that greatness took sacrifice. The FBI didn't storm in. There were no cuffs, no shouting, just 2 agents in plain clothes and a single knock on the door. I wasn't there, but they told me later that when he answered, he didn't flinch. He looked at the badge, looked at the warrant, and stepped aside like he'd been waiting for it. They questioned him at the federal office in Jacksonville. Agent Truitt let me sit in on part of it. He was thinner than I remembered grayer, but his eyes were sharp. He didn't deny anything. Said he'd kept copies, financial ledgers, burner phone logs, even notes from Alec. Said he knew it would come out eventually. What he didn't do was apologize. He talked about it all like it had happened to someone else, like he'd been a spectator in his own decisions. When they played the tape, his own voice saying, "Then make sure they don't talk." He didn't even blink, just folded his hands in his lap and waited for the next question. When they asked about the other boys, he shrugged. "I didn't ask questions," he said. "I just made sure the checks cleared." Dana asked if he knew they were being held tortured. He hesitated just once, then said, "I figured." Alec didn't do soft pressure. That was the only moment he sounded unsure. They booked him on 37 counts racketeering conspiracy accessory to kidnapping endangerment of minors obstruction of justice. He was transferred to a federal detention center the next morning. There would be no bail, no home monitoring. He was 72 years old and facing a life sentence, but that wasn't what stuck with me. What stuck was how still he was, like the arrest wasn't a collapse but a conclusion. Ricky testified first. He was calm, composed, even when they asked the hard questions about the bunker, the drugs, the beatings. He answered with clarity, no theatrics. He didn't try to shift blame, but he didn't take it all either. When they asked why he stayed, he said, "Because they made sure we didn't think we had anywhere else to go." When it was Zane's turn, they allowed him to testify remotely from a protected facility. He'd been moved there 2 weeks after waking, still fragile but determined. His voice cracked more than once, but he never stopped. He told them about the plane, about the gun, about the years that followed, about the dark. When he finished, there was no applause, just silence, the kind that settles when the truth finally gets too heavy to ignore. Malcolm didn't contest the charges. He entered a guilty plea and requested sentencing without delay. The judge granted it. When the hearing came, I was there. Zane stayed behind, watching through a secure live stream. The courtroom was small, half full. No reporters, no cameras, just a slow, quiet reckoning. The judge read each count, pausing only once to sip water. When she asked if Malcolm had anything to say, he stood, adjusted his suit, and said, "I don't expect forgiveness. I expect gravity." Then he sat back down. That was it. She sentenced him to life without parole. No one cried. Not even me. Afterward, I stepped outside alone. The sun was just beginning to fall, casting long shadows down the courthouse steps. Agent Truitt caught up to me near the parking lot. She said the case had closed 4 more loops, 3 other bans, 1 manager who'd vanished in 1990. All linked now. All tied to Alec. She said there would be more arrests, more questions. But the spine of it, the structure that had hidden them, was broken. "You did that," she told me. I didn't answer. I wasn't sure I believed it yet. Later that week, they held a private memorial for the original members of Crimson Fireline, Trent and Derek. Their families came. Small, quiet service. No press. Just flowers and photographs. I saw Ricky there standing at the edge of the crowd, hands folded in front of him. We didn't speak, but he nodded once as I passed. Zane sent a message that was read aloud, just a few lines about music and memory and silence, and how some songs never leave you even when the lights go out. 2 days after the service, I went to the evidence archive. Dana had arranged for me to pick up what they were willing to release. Among the boxes, old flyers, cassettes, photos. I found one thing I hadn't expected. A notebook. Black cover, spiral-bound, edges frayed. Inside were Zane's lyrics, pages of them, written by hand with smudged pencil and half-crossed-out verses. One line kept repeating in different versions. They told us we were fire, but they forgot fire eats itself. I copied that line onto a slip of paper and kept it in my wallet. That night, I sat in the living room with a cup of tea, the lights low, the house quiet. I called Zane. He picked up after 2 rings. His voice was stronger now, steady. We didn't talk about the trial, or Malcolm, or what came next. We just sat on the phone breathing, like there was still something holding us between the words. Something not broken, just scarred. And as the clock ticked toward midnight, I realized this wasn't the end of something. It was the start of living with what we knew. Sometimes I sit out on the back porch around dusk, just listening. It's quieter than it used to be, no traffic from the highway, no neighbors playing music. Just the wind in the lemon trees and the occasional creak of wood settling. I've come to appreciate the stillness more than I used to. For a long time, silence was something I feared. Now it feels earned. Zane is living up north now under a different name. The Bureau helped with relocation. Nothing dramatic, just enough to keep distance. He teaches guitar to kids at a community center and writes music when the migraines aren't too bad. He doesn't talk much about the years he lost, and I don't press him. I send him a letter every week, and we talk on Sundays. He never signs off without saying "love you." That's new. He didn't used to. Malcolm died 6 months into his sentence. Stroke, they said. No foul play, no last words. I didn't go to the burial. The state handled everything. They sent me a copy of his will. Nothing left, just a short letter folded between the pages. I don't expect you to forgive me, it read. But I hope you'll remember that I loved our son in my own way. I didn't keep it. Some things aren't meant to be preserved. The investigation into Alec's operation went deeper than anyone imagined. They found ledgers hidden in a dry well outside one of his properties. Names, dates, payment schedules. More boys. Other bands. Some alive, some not. There are other families like mine, mothers with half-filled albums, sisters who stopped celebrating birthdays. We've started writing to each other, not to rehash the past, but to bear witness to it, to make sure it stays real. Dana got promoted. She's running her own division now. Still calls me from time to time just to check in. Says the case changed how she thinks about silence, how often it hides what people aren't ready to face. I think she's right. Silence isn't always absence. Sometimes it's protection. Sometimes it's fear. And sometimes it's just the shape pain takes when it's had nowhere else to go. I don't go out much anymore. Not because I'm afraid, just because I've had enough noise for one lifetime. But when I do, sometimes someone stops me. Says they remember the band, that they had a Crimson Fireline cassette back in '81, that they wondered what happened. I don't tell them the full story. Just say they were good boys, that the music meant something. And it did. There's a small memorial now out near the bluff where Zane used to climb as a kid. Just a simple plaque, 4 names etched in bronze, one of them marked, Found. People leave guitar picks and scraps of lyrics. Every time I visit, I see something new. And every time I feel a little more whole. Not healed, not finished. Just standing. If this story stayed with you, share it. Speak the names. Let them echo past the silence. Some stories don't end in headlines. Some end in voices finally heard.